Let's talk about the LGBTQIA plus acronym, because, let's be honest, every day, week, month, and year, there are infighting and public scrutiny over the acronym and inclusion. Most people know the letters L, G, and B, lesbian, gay, and bisexual. Those are all about sexual orientation, who you're attracted to romantically or sexually. That part's straightforward. But then we get to the TQIA+, and everything shifts. T stands for transgender, which is about gender identity, not attraction. Q can mean queer or questioning. I stands for intersex, a biological condition. And A can mean asexual, aromantic, or agender, none of which necessarily involve being attracted to anyone at all. So here's the question that's sparking more and more debate. Should sexual orientation and gender identity be grouped together under one umbrella? Let's break it down. The core of the LGB argument has always been, we can't change who we're attracted to. This is who we are. That's been a huge part of gaining legal rights and social acceptance. The logic is simple, relatable, and powerful. People shouldn't be punished for loving who they love. But once you start adding gender identity and non-attraction-based labels into the same group, the message can get muddy, especially for people on the outside looking in. For example, someone might ask, if being gay is innate and unchangeable, how do you explain being gender fluid or non-binary, which some people say is a spectrum or evolves over time? That's not a bad question. And it's part of why some feel that the growing acronym risks undermining the hard-won progress of LGB advocacy. They fear it's becoming harder to explain and defend basic rights when people confuse attraction with identity, or when terms are perceived as more subjective or self-defined. But here's the other side. Historically, LGB and trans people have been oppressed together. In the early days, being gender non-conforming and being gay were often seen as the same problem by society. Trans women, especially trans women of color, were leaders in the early gay rights movement. Stonewall wasn't just a protest, it was a rebellion led by people across the entire gender and sexuality spectrum. The alliance isn't just theoretical, it's historical. Plus, many people identify across multiple categories. A trans man can be gay, a non-binary person can be bisexual. Asexual people often face the same erasure and misunderstanding that gay people used to, and still do in many places. So for them, splitting the letters feels artificial and exclusionary. Now here's where it gets tricky. The public often has limited patience for nuance. That's not ideal, but it's real. And when advocacy messaging gets too complicated, it can stall progress or even invite backlash. People might say, you told me being gay isn't a choice, but now you're saying gender can be fluid? So which is it? Or worse, this just proves the whole thing is a phase. That's a false equivalence, of course, but it's one that's easy to make when very different identities are presented as a single cause. So the concern is understandable. That's why some believe it might be better to separate the movements. They argue that LGB should focus on sexual orientation, while TQIA+ can focus on gender identity, gender diversity, and non-traditional experiences of attraction. Each group could advocate for its unique issues without being misrepresented or misunderstood. This wouldn't mean abandoning solidarity. It would mean being clearer about what each letter stands for and respecting the different paths people walk. Coalitions can work together without blending into a single acronym. But of course, there's a risk fragmentation. Smaller movements often get ignored, underfunded, or attacked more easily when they're isolated. Many fear that if trans people, intersex folks, or asexual people lose their place in the LGBTQ+ umbrella, they'll be left behind in the fight for rights, respect, and recognition. So what's the answer? Maybe it's not about keeping or dropping letters, but about better communication. That LGB is about who you love, while TQIA+ is about who you are. And both deserve acceptance, just through different lenses. And maybe it's also about letting people advocate for their identity without forcing everyone into one label. Because solidarity doesn't mean sameness. It means showing up for each other, even when our experiences are different. So what do you think? Should LGB and TQIA plus stay under one banner? Or would splitting help both groups speak more clearly and advocate more effectively? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real talk about identity, society, and everything in between.